What a morning. Wow. So, last night I intended to stay up, but I couldn't do it. So, I watched the exit poll and thought, oh my god, I hope this is wrong. And then went to bed. Woke up in time to hear Boris Johnson's speech. I'd missed Corbyn's speech, but I heard Boris Johnson's speech and Swinston's speech. Um, and then went digging and looking at the polls and looking at the vote. What an absolute mess. So my initial prediction, which is kind of what I was hoping for, honestly, was either a by-election vulnerable small Tory majority, preferably sort of low-end single figures, or a hung parliament with Conservatives as largest party. Because Labour are an absolute shambles. The Conservatives aren't much better and don't deserve any real power for any length of time. But the Conservatives are the only ones I saw with a vision for, well, not a vision for, but at least the tools in place to get Brexit underway. Not done, but get it underway properly, finally. We could at least trigger we could at least ratify the withdrawal agreement and make some progress, and then we'd have another election probably a year or two down the line. That was my thought process. And then we can get someone in, hopefully from the left, with a pragmatic view on Brexit, rather than, well, wouldn't it be nice if we just reran the whole thing again and pretended it didn't happen? Um, so yeah, that was kind of what I was hoping for. I really, really hoped we didn't have what happened last night. We've got the biggest Conservative majority in decades, but along with that, we have a situation where the SNP have massively increased their seats. Is it 48, I think, or 49 seats out of 59? It's a lot. It's not good. So we have the nationalisms, as it were, competing against each other. And that's a problem. That's a real problem. And I don't think it's much of a problem immediately. But considering the size of the Conservative majority and considering how unlikely it is that there's going to be another election in the next 5 years, it is a problem after the Scottish parliamentary elections, because if the SNP manage to replicate their success there, then they do have quite a significant mandate for a second independence referendum. Um, I don't think they have a mandate right now, at least not in the way that they think they do, purely because we we have other things we need to be doing, for one, and every single major party in the UK has essentially said we don't want a referendum right now. Even if we do want one at all, we don't want one right now. Can we just hang on a minute? The SNP ran their campaign on stopping Brexit, not on campaigning for independence explicitly. Which is why I think they will shout and holler and scream, but they have no real force until Holyrood. That's the issue. Once Holyrood, the election there happens, then we're in all sorts of deep doo-doo. So yeah, I expect in 2022, 2023 we'll have another Scottish independence referendum. Would not be surprised in the slightest. I'll do another video on what I think the Conservatives are likely to do with their majority. I am going to look at things with a clear head, because Boris this morning said something to Tory HQ, which has been posted online. Audio of it's been posted online, and it does make me wonder. So I'm going to give him a chance, because he said we need to change the image of our party and we need to reform our party. He's talking about proper reform of the party. Now, what does that mean? Which Boris Johnson are we going to see? Are we going to see the sort of one nation Boris Johnson that he keeps banging on about, that a lot of the people who worked with him as Mayor of London keep banging on about? The bumbling idiot who's a sort of liberal, kind of, at least in certain aspects, possibly more liberal than Cameron? Or does he mean reform it in a right-wing direction, and we end up seeing Boris Johnson, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Priti Patel, Dominic Raab? Now, he has more of a pool to pull from. So it'll be very interesting to see when he makes his cabinet where we end up, which is why I want to leave that discussion really for another video, because we just don't know yet. But the Lib Dems, they're toast. And I think Norman Lamb summed it up pretty well talking to the BBC. He's essentially said the extremist position of the revoke policy is what killed them. It doesn't seem particularly democratic. And I think that's what's hurt them, especially in the southwest, especially in the sort of small C conservative southern Lib Dem marginals. That's what's killed them off. Even if you're Remain-minded, we kept hearing this, even if you're Remain-minded and you want a second referendum, the revoke policy does put a lot off. It really does. And I think it did at this election. And Labour. In some ways, I'm glad they've lost. In some ways, I'm glad they've had to look at themselves. I'm not glad, obviously, because we're going to have a massive Tory majority and all the baggage that brings with it. But here's the thing. If the analysis straight after the election is correct, and Labour have lost essentially off the back of Corbyn's personal unpopularity and the ridiculous Brexit position that they were trying to straddle, then once the Brexit process has begun properly, Labour are a shoo-in, in theory, because Labour can't go on a second referendum campaign again, and Corbyn's gone, or he will be. So that's going to be very interesting to see how that unfolds. Now, the other issue, I guess, is how much will it take to persuade former Labour voters to go back to Labour? Because John Curtis had a very interesting stat, which has me slightly worried that my previous comment won't hold much water. Working class, the most working class constituencies in the country, swung from Labour to Conservative by a margin of, on average, 12%. The most middle class constituencies in the country swung from Labour to Conservative by a margin of 6%. Labour is generally thought of as the working class party. If you are losing the working class that badly, you've got a more endemic problem. And I don't know how you fix it. And the problem is, I don't see the centrists in Labour coming up with an answer. Centrist politics is clearly not popular. We've seen the Lib Dems get demolished. We've seen all of the sort of independent candidates that were standing, the former Labour, former Tory independents that were standing, they've all been wiped out. Even a lot of those that switched from other parties to the Lib Dems have been wiped out. No more Chuka Umunna, no more Sarah Wollaston, no more Sam Gyimah, whatever his name is. So, centrist politics clearly isn't popular. The Remain second ref message clearly isn't particularly popular. So where do Labour go? Do they double down with Corbynism? Do they give it another shot with a different face? If it is a different face, who is it? Are we going to be playing identity politics with who's going to be this new face? Are we going to pick somebody who's a woman for the sake of picking a woman, rather than picking somebody who's most qualified? Not to say that there aren't women who are highly qualified for that job, but are we going to be looking at gender first rather than at qualification or ability? Are we going to be looking at class first before ability? Are we going to be looking at race first before ability? That's what I'm more concerned about. Uh, with the current Labour membership, I could see them picking somebody like Diane Abbott to be Labour leader purely on their identity points, and that's so sad because Labour does have a lot to offer. I'm a former Labour member. I was a Labour member for a reason. I quite liked most of the 2017 Labour manifesto. I thought the 2019 manifesto went way too far. Um, so it's going to be interesting, I guess, to see what Labour decides to do. It's going to be interesting to see which heads prevail inside the Labour camp. Um, so, yeah, a very fascinating few weeks ahead. It's going to make Christmas interesting, that's for sure. And I shall do more videos in the future on all this. Sorry I've been away for a bit, guys, by the way. I just had a lot going on. So I've not been able to sit down and record my ramblings. But hopefully you found this interesting.